back to another episode of Blacktop. I'm here. It's your boy LJ.
Worlds.
On my day.
So we're back with the NFL season, September 10th. Dr. Fauci has encouraged the NFL to follow the NBA's current COVID-19 practices. So that will help them decrease the amount of movement between cities and teams should all be located in one hotel. We don't think that the NFL is truly prepared for COVID, and we don't think they have any way to minimize the risk to these players. The Chicago Bears recently had 9 players test positive for COVID-19. The coach of the Chicago Bears truly feels like NFL teams will not make it through the entire season without being exposed to COVID-19. And you also have to think about it. When these players are exposed to COVID-19, when you have multiple players out, will these teams be able to fill their rosters to play these games? It is a difficult question for the NFL right now. The NFL does not have the strategy in place, nor have they had the administrative functions in place to prevent these players from being exposed. This is a deep question.
All right, I'll start. So what we know about the NFL so far is that opening day, September 17th, is slated between the Texans and the Chiefs. We got the 2 quarterback matchup probably of the season, Deshaun Watson versus Patrick Mahomes, Thursday night football. Everyone's excited. The NFL is back. Football is back. And since the start of training camp, they've conducted about 75,000 COVID tests first 2 weeks. 56 players have tested positive since training camp, and about 77 had false positive tests, COVID tests, that could have been caused by an isolated contamination incident that happened in New Jersey. And you mentioned Dr. Fauci proposed a bubble idea, what the NBA has, which is tremendous. No positive COVID tests are doing great so far down in Orlando. But what do we know about the NFL? The NFL season was going to start regardless of coronavirus, whether it had 1 million deaths, 25 million cases, no matter what, because the NFL is a sport within its own. And here's why. ESPN, Fox, CBS pay nearly $6 billion, not millions, $6 billion to the NFL for broadcasting rights. You think the NFL is going to lose on that kind of money? No organization, no business owner. If you own something, somebody presents you $6 million, you're not going to turn that down. And they can't do a bubble like the NBA because they just too much players. You have 56 roster spots compared to the NBA that has about 14, 15. You have more coaches. You have more personnel that travels. It just would not work. For the NFL to consider a bubble, they would have to do probably rent out like Rhode Island just to be able to fit all the players and the staff in there and to conduct daily testing, which is going to cost them a lot of money. The NBA, when you have less players, less staff, it's more controllable. Now we know that the NFL wants to do a bubble scenario when it comes to playoff time because you have less teams. Now it could be more manageable and possibly less tests conducted compared to the 75,000 that they did in the beginning of training camp. So bubble is out the way. The false positive test, I mean, that could happen at any time in situation. When you go to the doctor's office, you get a test done. There could be a false positive. We've seen that with pregnancy tests before. So I don't know what happened with that contamination thing in New Jersey.
Yeah, I don't think that's not something that should be taken as some common mistake, right?
Yeah. No, for sure.
We're going into a season with players, fans, and for the NBA, for the NFL, to not strategically ensure that they have the tools in place to make sure that these players are safe, and you can't even control positive versus false positive tests. I think that's irresponsible on the NBA. I think that shows another NFL, sorry. NBA is on my mind. NFL. And I think that also shows that Roger Goodell is not truly invested in these players, nor are the owners.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, Rose, you have a great point, but that's not an excuse for them to just, go full blast on the regular season. That doesn't give them an excuse to just, okay, we're just going to do regular rules, all that stuff, no regulations, no nothing. It's ridiculous that Roger Goodell hasn't implemented some type of restriction or rule telling teams that, hey, you can't allow fans into the stadium. He's allowing all teams to allow fans into the stadiums. He's leaving that decision up to them. And that's ridiculous in my opinion, because we now know only the Giants and the Jets so far have truly confirmed that they're not going to allow fans in the stadiums. But we already heard Jerry Jones. He wants fans in his stadiums. And even the Saints owner, who just coincidentally caught COVID recently, they're talking about having fans in their stadiums too. So to me, it's ridiculous that teams are even considering of having fans in the stadiums. And to me, you can't tell me there's not hotels, college campuses that are shut down right now that can't host these NFL teams. Yes, it's going to be difficult, but you can't tell me you can't have some type of bubble where you have multiple hotels working accordingly, because the hotels business is shot right now. Hotels are doing terrible right now because of COVID. So you can't tell me they wouldn't be interested in taking in money to host these NFL players for a certain amount of weeks, and they just adjust accordingly. That would be, honestly, to me, that's the perfect plan. Either work with a hotel or work with the college campus. And the college campus, especially the big ones that are shut down right now, they can definitely easily work with the NFL teams because they can hold that many people. Now, will they have to cut down on staff and stuff like that? And some of them would have to work from home? Yes, of course, but that's just the regulations you have to make. But the fact that we're even considering having fans in the stadium, I don't care if it's, separated or they have masks on and stuff. It's just not a good look, especially when you already have players, you already have owners, you already have coaches who have caught COVID already. It's just not a good look at all.
But what do we go back what I said before when we were shooting here a couple of weeks ago? Roger Goodell is not a good commissioner.
He doesn't care.
He doesn't care. No. So that just goes back to my point. The NFL season was going to happen regardless of what the COVID numbers were. Because again, when you have $6 billion of broadcast television rights at stake, there is no way in hell Roger Goodell is turning down that money. There is no way in hell the owners are turning down that kind of revenue money. So you say, you know what? Hey, some of them will have no fans. Majority of owners want to have fans, as you mentioned, Jerry Jones is one of them. But to say that the bubble idea would work, well, you only look at Orlando, Florida. There was the only team or the only location that you could tell that had a bubble because they had multiple arenas that you could play basketball with. And the NFL was right there to go right away. Also give credit, it was during in season when the coronavirus pandemic happened. But again, they were one of the first organizations to act upon it. Now with the NFL, they can't do that in Orlando, Florida because there's just not enough room. I don't see a football stadium where you can host about, 5 games at a time for the NFL season for about 16 weeks. Really 20 weeks because you have playoffs and stuff like that.
Yeah, give the NBA some, they got some slack, right? They were going into the playoffs. They were able to really minimize the amount of teams that had to go into this bubble. Yes, fair. But back to the overall arching issue, which is health. For us to strategically say, we want fans in a stadium, we want players to play, right? But yet there's no strategy to truly say that these players won't catch COVID. These players will not be subjected to catching COVID, and also that the fans won't be subjected to catching COVID. It's irresponsible of any commissioner to allow any owner to strategize around that without a legit, and not just a systematic plan. So it should be a plan that can go across all teams, not just one. A big issue I find with Roger right now is that he acknowledges that team owners have not done enough for players. But yet he's allowing these team owners to come up with the strategy for COVID, knowing that the strategy is most likely not going to be in the interest of a player. How do we start a season? We've seen the false positives. We've seen the Chicago Bears, their coaching staff deal with these headaches. We understand that, no offense to NFL players, a lot of them are not as financially, well off as NBA players. So they don't have that option to just opt out of a season sometimes, especially because although that they have a crisis, I want to say contract in place, an agreement that allows them to get some financial burden relief. It's nothing substantial to the amount of their costs, the amount of their living, the amount of money they have to present on a monthly basis. It won't help them throughout the season. So truly the NFL has done nothing to make sure that these players will hold. And everything they have done has been very little to encourage these players to play. We have players that are questioning should they sit out in games, and they don't want to. You have a few players that have opted out, but overall, it's very hard for a player to make that decision. One, they love playing football. Two, they don't have the financial means to easily cut it off.
One question I'll pose to y'all is, what do you think about having it on a college campus? Because a college campus can hold thousands of people, and you just have one stadium and just have them play throughout the day. What do you guys think of that? Honestly, I think that's the best. What else could they do?
To go back to your point, what college campus would you be thinking about? Because a lot of them are going back to school.
But there's a good amount that haven't had students back yet.
Well, I mean, maybe some of them out west. I know you, California schools. I don't think they're going back. But would you go to a campus like UCLA? And are you going to have players stay in the dorms?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Would they even fit? Because I don't know how many UCLA students is, but I'll say 50,000. That's probably maybe
more than enough.
I don't know if that's enough though.
How could you not have? First of all, let's go down to the strategy, right? First, how many players actually need to be in this? That's one, right? There's a certain amount of players that, you have to realistically say as a coach, they might not even play this season. Let's just be honest. People that's injury prone, people that you just want to sit out, people that actually are injured, people that just you weren't going to play regardless. They just weren't going to be played this season. So those players don't need to be in the bubble. Or strategically match it, or figure out as a commissioner, not as a team owner, as a commissioner, who do I need to bring around? And if we need to swap somebody out because somebody gets injured, how do we do it strategically, right? So that takes a bigger picture look and overview that somebody needs to dive in and make sure that happens. When we look at, I want to say give a round of applause to like the Rams, the Chargers, the 49ers. They're not going to have any fans for the start of the season. And I think that's really what a team should be doing, not subjecting their fans to potential health issues. We all understand how much sports fans love their favorite teams, right? So the likelihood of a sports fan coming out is extremely high, right? You're not going to see a sports fan say, no, I'm not going to come out to my favorite team's game. It just doesn't happen like that a lot of times. And as much as we see COVID as being a barrier to that, we don't, these fans are still going to come out to see their team. They're still going to tailgate. That's another issue. You have fans that's going to tailgate. That's going to cause a large group. And there's a lot of people that tailgate that don't even go in the damn stadium sometimes. So when you look at those objects and people that's going to be around, then you have to look at the players, right? We still don't know enough about this disease to strategically say that if a fan is in the stands and has something and they can be as close to the field as possible, we don't know what that looks like. But if they can transmit it through the air, why wouldn't these players be subject to it?
And I also think another big factor is flying. Travel,
yes.
You travel, and I don't know about y'all, but when I travel, I know that a lot of times I'm more susceptible to catching a cold, or I feel like my immune system is lower because I'm around all these different people. I'm traveling across the country, and these players are going to be traveling across the country, and their sleeping schedule is going to be messed up. They're going to be uncomfortable on these planes, stuff like that. So they're going to be more susceptible to catching a cold, or it could be falsely tested for COVID or something like that. So I feel like travel is really even if they do it by bus, it's not going to make a difference, because when you're traveling, I feel like your immune system is not as strong as just being wherever you're at locally.
Yeah, you think of this, right? We're in this close by. It's three of us, and the camera guy, 4, right? So at the end of the day, we've been keeping distance. When we shoot the shows, we're in very close proximity. The same thing you see on First Take, the same thing you see on Undisputed. As much as you want to be in close proximity, you are still within a vicinity that is very close, whether you have 6 feet or not, because of the air. It's only 3 of us, so we can kind of have a better tracer with that. How do you trace thousands of fans coming to the stands, hundreds of players being on the field, or, you can talk about maybe 100 players easy. That doesn't include administrative staff, right? How do you trace that to ensure that if there is an outbreak, right? Because it can take one game to cause a major outbreak in the city. One game could cause a major outbreak, because when those fans leave, who's quarantining those fans?
Not even a game, one practice.
One practice, but not even that. Just to go back to if they started with fans, let's just say they start the season and they have fans in it. It can take one game to cause a major outbreak in the city. You have, basically the NFL can cause a major outbreak in the city by allowing fans to enter these stands. Because once that happens, it could have been that I'm a fan in those stands. I contracted it from somebody. Now I go back to 10, 15 people. Now, if you got 1,000 people, and let's just say you're in contact with 10 to 15 people before you even realize you have this. Some people won't realize they have it, right? Because they don't have the symptoms that everybody else has. And now before you know it, and I'm just using 1,000 fans, that's a very low number, but let's just say 1,000 fans, they go back and they touch 10 to 15 people. That's 15,000 people. That doesn't include the players. That doesn't include everybody else. And then we come back to the same issue of NFL not making money, because once those players get COVID, and depending on how many players get it, you can't play a game. So why even subject them to this torture? That's really what it is. It's like inhumane torture for you to make money. It's modern day slavery at the end of the day. You're putting them in conditions just for you to make money as a commissioner, as an owner. That's irresponsible.
Going back to what you guys said about, the owners allowing or have the power to allow whether they have fans allow fans in the stadium or not. Well, really, that's up to different states' protocols. New York, you're not allowed to have any fans in the arena. That's why you see the Yankees and the Mets are playing without fans. Mm-hmm. That's why you see not talk about the Madison Square Garden, but if the NBA didn't have a bubble, there'll be no fans at the Barclays Center. But you go down to Texas, they have allowed fans to be at a 50% capacity rate. Mm-hmm. So that's a different rule. And Jerry Jones, he's going to utilize that rule because he's like, listen, I'm already losing a good amount of profit and revenue sales with no tickets. So if I can have half that back, I'm definitely going to do that. All owners are money hungry at the end of the day. You think they give a damn about their players? No, they only care about you if you can line up in their pockets. That's all they could. We live in a capitalistic society. Now, going back to what you guys said about, NFL not being prepared. Listen, COVID happened in March? We're about to be in September. There's been 6 months of coronavirus, and they have not had a well thought out plan to say, well, okay, you kind of say, well, they should have thought of a bubble. Well, the NBA already had the bubble idea because it was already in season. There's only so many amount of people, players and staff that you can hold down in Orlando. There's no football size stadiums that you could have to play as many games in one day. You brought up the idea about a college campus. Well, okay, say if you go, we use Rutgers University as an example. I went to close to Rutgers. I went to Mount University. Rutgers is about 35 minutes out from me. Well, there's only one stadium. Maybe you could put the players in college campus, have like a dorm environment, but you still need to play those games. So you're going to have there's 32 NFL teams. You're going to have, and there's about 10 games, we say average per week. You can't have 10 games in one day at a single stadium.
Just have to play throughout the week.
But, and again, how is that going to work with TV revenue, TV deals and stuff like that? There's going to have to be a whole bunch of restructuring contracts with CBAs, collective bargaining agreement. So that's just a whole bunch of stuff going on with the legal side of things. So it's just a tricky situation. Again, I'm not on the NFL side. They should have been more prepared about this. They had 6 months to have a well thought out plan. Now, when the false positive test came out with 77 false positive COVID tests came out, now they talk about, tier 1 and tier 2 employees have to wear masks and stuff like that. Wait a minute. I thought everybody had to wear masks. Yeah. If you're affiliated with the team in any way, even if you're a beat writer for the team, you have to wear masks.
Exactly.
So I don't know where that tier 1, tier 2 came up with. I just think that it just shows a lack of leadership by Roger Goodell. It shows an uncaring and lack of leadership by the owners, the front staff. And it just goes to show you that some of them may not think COVID is a serious deal, but at the end of the day, they're looking at it as a business standpoint, and the less dollars that they could lose, the more that they'll go forward that path instead of the player safety.
And another huge factor is weather. A lot of these players, they suffer from heat exhaustion and stuff like that. And we're not even talking about weather, where they say that rates are going to shoot back up during the wintertime. So imagine playing in Green Bay, where it's like minus 30, snowing, and COVID's shooting through the roof. Yeah. God forbid, but let's just, you're just putting these players in a terrible situation right now.
You have to also look at this, right? Is it worth, Rodgers having the team start the season so early? Would it hurt them to start the season in December, January? This is why I say that. We have to prepare for the second wave. Second wave, we're predicting, I think, October, November-ish. Give it some time to understand what that second wave is going to look like. Because what happens when you're allowing fans, let's just say, there's a transition. You also have to think about this. There's going to be a transition period when we're in the second wave that we have not realized it yet. And I figured that would be about 2 weeks. So let's say if we realized, I'm just using this as an example, if we realized in November 15th that the second wave hit, they probably started end of October, early November. And we're just realizing it because now those people have, the quarantine period. Let's just say it does take you 10 days to get sick. They're just realizing, hey, I'm getting sick. So you're getting the after effects. It already started. These people have already touched, or if you want to think of it as tracing, they have already touched many different stadiums. If they're an active fan, they have went to many different tailgating events. And when you look at it in that perspective, I don't think the NFL is prepared, let alone for the past of COVID, right? We already got to this stage where we understand certain tendencies of COVID. And they're not prepared for that. So how are you going to be prepared for a whole new wave where you don't know what it's going to look like, how it's going to be, how many people are going to be affected, but yet we're allowing players, we're allowing team owners to make the decision that fans should be in the stadium. That's just irresponsible. Then two, we're subjecting these players to that. The NFL should push back the season. The season should start probably mid-January, and they should do limited amount of games. It should not be the same amount of games. You don't have to do the full season. Do half season. There's strategies that you could propose. Now you might have to push out the season to maybe sometime in the summer, but it's probably more strategic to do it that way than to just put these players on Front Street. The biggest question is this: what are we doing about the college players that will likely play? Because at the end of the day, they want to make that 2021 draft and for the NFL draft prospects, right? That's a difficult question for them. And they're going to play. A lot of these college players are not going to take this, being seniors most likely, are not going to take this season off.
Well, so far, what we know on the college route, LSU wide receiver Jamar Chase, who's the top prospect wide receiver in the draft of 2021, he's not playing his junior season at LSU, so he's just going to work out and get his body right for next year's upcoming draft. Now, with the whole college thing, I know a couple of conferences decided not to forego this season. I know Big Ten was one of them. But Ohio State, they're looking to start somewhere in maybe November, December. I don't know if they're going to just be an independent this season and go back to the Big Ten. That, again, goes with a whole bunch of legal issues, stuff like that. I don't know what involved with that particularly. But, you're going to have, I believe, ACC's playing. I believe ACC and maybe the SEC's playing. But there's no Big Ten. So how is that going to correlate? They had to do last-minute scheduling changes. And if you're a college player in the Big Ten, he's like Ohio State, Justin Fields, for example. He's going to be a top prospect in next year's upcoming NFL draft. You're like, wait a minute. That's good for him because you know what? I don't have to play. You already seen 2 years of tape of me when I was at Ohio State last year when I led the team into the semifinals for the college football playoffs. So you already seen what I do on tape. He's avoiding himself possibly getting injured and costing himself millions if he slides down the draft board. But Trevor Lawrence, on the other hand, who's an ACC that plays for Clemson University, I believe he's going to play. But it's like, wait a minute. Say if he rolls an ankle, messes up a knee, or, tears a tricep or something. Oh, wow, this guy got injured. His draft stock might fall, and that could cost him a couple $millions down the line. So it's just a tricky situation because now you have these different conferences are not playing. I know the lesser school, my alumni, Monmouth University, they're not having a season. They cancel Big South, They cancel their football season. But if you're going to have some conferences playing football season and some conferences that are already canceled, how's that going to work? And plus, some of them are looking to start, games in the spring. Mm-hmm. I can assure you that Roger Goodell and the NFL is not pushing back the NFL draft. So if the Big Ten, Ohio State and Michigan State, they start playing, say, in March, NFL draft is in April. They're not pushing that thing back. And a lot of players are going to opt out. I was like, wait a minute. Why am I going to play a college season, quote unquote, for free? Because some of them get paid on the table. Let's be real. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to play a college season for free when I'm an eligible top prospect and next year's draft, I could risk myself getting injured. I'm not going to play. So that's just going to create a whole bunch of issues within each school. I don't know how that's going to work, but I mean, so far I've seen colleges have more of a better protocol than the NFL does. And that just goes to say a lot. It goes to show how pathetic the leadership is on a professional level. But I don't know. It's just a lot of uncertainty right now at this point. I mean, college season still slated to be kicked off. I just don't know how they're going to go. And if they do decide, some of them are going to decide to go ahead with the spring season. NFL's not going to push back its draft. And that's going to affect maybe next year's too, because are the schools going to start just having only spring football seasons now because of COVID, or are they ever going to go back to fall? So it's just a whole bunch of questions and uncertainty that we don't know at this moment.
Yeah, NCAA is definitely in the same field of NFL as just handling this terribly. You already have some of the top teams not playing this season, so it's going to be weird that, what are they going to do? They're going to play like half the season because half of their schedule is canceled because half of those teams, opted out of this season. So it's just a weird situation. And again, it goes back to all these different factors: travel, weather, them being on campus with regular students, regular teachers, and all that stuff. It's just, honestly, it's just a whole mess. And it's like, I don't know what are they gonna do? It's like, what happens when they play their first 5 games or whatever, and then they got to go out of conference to play a team that's not playing. Like, is it just going to be a automatic win? Is it going to be a bye week for them? Or, I just don't know. So it's like, it's tough to speak on this because it's like both the NCAA and NFL has handled this terribly. And one thing I will add is that we can't have these players thinking, rapper Plies talked about this a couple of weeks back. He's like, you can't have these players thinking that football's all they got. you can't have these kids thinking, oh, football's all they got, so they got to play. Like, no, don't tell them that. Because first of all, they're student athletes, okay? So they're students first. I know a lot of them come to school to play football, obviously. None of them really care about college. But they students first. They can get a degree. They can do something outside of football. You don't just limit them to just football, okay? So this notion that, oh, football's all they got, football's all they need, it's their life. Like, no, don't tell these kids that, because you're going to brainwash them thinking, oh, I got to play this season. You putting their lives on the line. That's not right.
Yeah. That goes back to, again, leadership. You look at the ADs and the coaches. Alabama, Nick Saban and their athletic director, a big majority of their sports revenue comes from that Alabama football team alone. I believe it's like 75% comes from Alabama football, from the ticket sales, their broadcast TV rights, all that type of stuff. So they're going to be like, well, these kids have got to play football because they're going to lose on that big chunk of money. Clemson, too. There's a reason why they wanted to play, because Clemson football is pretty much the holy grail of their sports department. Same thing if you look at, Ohio State, if they were playing, stuff like that. But they are looking at it, they don't care about the players. ADs, coaches who are already millionaires, it's like, you know what, if we don't play, I'm not going to be getting those that paycheck from that school. So let's brainwash and tell these kids that they have to play so I could get my money and they could continue to play for free. Listen.
You know what's interesting?
I don't know.
You know what's interesting? During the George Floyd thing, the James Blake and stuff like that, all these coaches were silent. But when the COVID thing happened, oh no, they gotta play. We gotta speak up for these players. They gotta play. But when the whole, all the protests and stuff, all these coaches stay quiet.